Hi, Leah Goujon here on my journey of building a house and commercial property in the Dominican Republic. I am going to start right at the beginning with the search of the property. So the biggest concern when we're looking for property here in the Dominican Republic is title. We want to make sure that we are purchasing a property that the person that is selling it to us has title, and that title is that there's the ability for that title to be passed along to you. So there's several red flags here. So first of all, let me just explain that owning land here and having title land here is very much the same as it is in Canada and the United States. When you buy a piece of property, title is registered in your name, and then you own that property. Typically in Canada, title is registered before you, it's kind of done the exact same day. Your lawyer will register the title and give you the key to your property the exact same day. So in Canada, we register titles on the computer. We don't even have to visit a title registry office. Here in the Dominican Republic, it is a different process. So the process here when you're buying something, we use a lawyer here in the Dominican Republic. So, and that lawyer is obtained right at the beginning of the process. So once you have found something that you want to buy, that's the moment that you want to hire a lawyer, because that lawyer is actually going to help you negotiate and then come up with a final agreement of purchase and sale that is that your both parties are legally bound to and everyone is in agreement to. So the details in your agreement of purchase and sale obviously are going to be things like how much you're paying for the property, when you what deposit you're going to put down, and at what point in time will you be paying the rest. So in my case, the total property was $65,000. So I put $10,000 down once the agreement was settled and both parties had agreed. And that $10,000, I actually gave instruction because the builder was subdividing this great big piece of land, and it was important to me that this back road was there. It was incumbent on me building the small house at the back of the property and then having commercial frontage onto the main, more busier road. So for me, one of the conditions of my offer was that I was not going to pay the rest of the price for the land until he had built that road, and he had permission to use my $10,000 deposit to do so. So title took from, it was August of 2020 that we negotiated, and I gave him my $10,000, and then the process was started to get the title transferred over, because the other condition, of course, was that until the title was actually in my name, I wasn't giving him the other $55,000, and that took until June. So that was almost a year, and that was without any issues. So here in the Dominican Republic, some of the issues that you come across is somebody sort of arguing ownership. Here in the Dominican Republic, much the same as in Canada, any land that is not registered by an individual is considered crown land in Canada, or here just land owned by the government. Now, the government does acknowledge and understand that a lot of land here is owned through virtue of squatting. So in Canada, we have a 20-year squatter's right, and the same as in the Dominican Republic, it's 20 years. So which just means that if you build something and you live on a piece of property, or you build a fence, or you sort of create some sort of boundary and structure, and you own and use that for 20 years unencumbered, not bothered by anybody else, no one else telling you to move it, then that property is deemed yours. Now, here in the Dominican Republic, in order for a family to get title, and I'm talking title to a piece of land that has probably been in their family for hundreds of years, they would have to register the title with the government, and it's $1,000 US. Plus, they would have to hire a surveyor, which is, another $800 or so. So it's very expensive for a Dominican to register title on a piece of property that legally is already theirs. Now, what happens sometimes is at the end of the day is, let's say, one Dominican family says, oh, this is our property and it's been in our family for generations. And they tell you that they might not have title, but really the registration process for title is $1,000, and they can get title because they've clearly been on the land for more than 20 years. It's been in their family, and it's not that difficult. The difficulty comes when somebody argues. So what happens is, once the application is made, the government then puts up a notice in the neighborhood basically saying, oh, this Dominican family is claiming title to this specific piece of land. There's a part of the process where that Dominican family has to delineate that piece of land to identify it. And then if anybody in the neighborhood says, oh no, my grandfather used to farm that land, so I also want to claim some ownership to that land, then we start this process of argument. So sometimes at the end of the day, if the neighbor steps in and says, oh no, I want a piece of the pie, then, sometimes a couple of $1,000 and they're fine. So it's not the end of the road, but it definitely starts to create problems. I can tell you the biggest obstacle that I ran into here in Las Terrenas specifically was some dude named Rafael. So as I was shopping for property, I'm going to say 75% of the pieces of property that I looked at did not have registered title, which again, for me, wasn't a massive issue as long as I had some indications that it was going to be possible that we could register a title. So that's when you start talking to neighbors and saying, oh, so-and-so is selling their land. Is there any other claims to it? Do you know of any problems? And I actually had started the negotiation process with one person. He was looking at subdividing his land. And he didn't have title to it, but clearly had ownership of it, and it had been in his family for generations. So at the end of the day, once we had already negotiated a price, and that was just him and I in conversation, and then it came forward that in the 1980s was when, in the 1970s is when the first expats, so like the first non-Dominicans started visiting this area, Las Terrenas. And for about 10 years, it was mostly French people actually coming from France. And they started coming here and vacationing here. There was no hotels. There was, the odd little beach restaurant. There wasn't even steadily running electricity until 1994. In the entire town. So they kind of came to a sleepy little village and fell in love and started, doing stuff. And then by the 1980s, they started buying. So now these Dominican families who have owned these pieces of property for generations needed to register title to these properties because that's the only way they can sell it. And of course, most people outside of the country are not going to buy a piece of property without title. It's not something I recommend because it's until you go through the title process that you would find out if there's actually going to be a problem with the title and someone arguing it. So, that's the thing that you have to be aware of. So this Rafael dude he was a Dominican guy in the 80s who was a smart guy. He sort of noticed that there was a lot of non-Dominicans coming into Las Terrenas and buying land and wanting to buy land, and this land wasn't registered. So he started going around and just randomly registering all kinds of land here in town. And because it was only $1,000 per parcel for him to register this land. I don't even know what the price was back then. That's the price now. And so like he's registering somebody else's land. So that other person would then get a notice from the government saying, oh, Rafael has registered ownership to your land. And the Dominican family would be like, well, we don't care because we own it. It's been in our families for centuries. He can't own it. So we really don't care. He can't sell it. He can't do anything with it. So for us, it's of no importance. And not only that, they would not have had the money to hire a lawyer and to fight the actual registration. So for them, it wasn't important because legally, he couldn't take possession of the land anyway. So for them, it was like, oh, some dude's wasting their money. But he was actually a pretty smart guy, because now I can tell you out of, I don't know, maybe let's say 10 or 15 different parcels of property and all over the town, some just outside of town, some inside town, some up a little bit higher, some down low. I would say 75% of those pieces of property, once I really started questioning the owner about title, eventually in the conversation, this Raphael's name would come up. And it would be presented that yes, he does have the registered title, and he's probably going to ask a few $1,000s as part of the deal to get it negotiated. Now, when I did the verbal agreement with this other person, he had no idea how much money this Raphael dude was going to ask for, to get the title transferred. And at the end of the day, he has $20,000 US, which for both of us was too much. It was too much as a percentage of the property that I was buying, and it made the property out of the market. The guy that I would have been buying it from wasn't prepared to take less money to accommodate for the $20,000, so that particular deal fell apart. And I also realized at that point in time that this Raphael guy, he would kind of see like white people coming and say, I can get an extra 10 or 20,000 US dollars on every single piece of property. So, there's a lot of weird things here. That Raphael dude was, someone that I did encounter 75% of the time that I started talking to people. So the property that I ended up buying was actually owned by a man from Barcelona who's lived in Las Terrenas for over 30 years, and he's owned this particular piece of property for over 30 years. So he was smart. 30 years ago when he first came here and retired, he bought a bunch of land. And it was land that wasn't super close to the beach, but close enough that now, 30 years later, it's prime land. So he's subdivided three other projects over the last couple of years, or two other projects over the last couple of years, and this is his third. So I think there's, I want to say 9 lots altogether. 4 of them front onto the main road, and all of the other ones are in the back on a little street that he has created. So as far as development of the land goes, all he's done is built a small dead-end dirt road. And everything else is up to the individual homeowners. So that's title here in the Dominican Republic. A condition of my purchase was that I did not give the seller the remaining amount of money until I had my title. So that was my out. He, in case there was a problem and he could never get title for some weird reason, at the end of the day, he had the ability to back out of the deal, but he would have had to pay me double my deposit back. So double my $10,000 deposit. If he backed out, he would have owed me $20,000. So, he really had to go into this process pretty sure that he was going to get title. So, all the stuff that he had said to me verbally about title and having title and, his history had to be true, or it was going to cost him money. So, if you understand the laws here, that you can understand how you can position yourself in such a way that, you aren't going to get taken advantage of, and that you can, pretty much secure yourself a pretty good transition of title. So if you guys have any other title questions, feel free to ask. And like I said, I'm not a title expert. I'm not a lawyer. I don't, I've only done one deal here, but I am a researcher. So I do know a lot about the process, and I know about the law here. So I'm happy to try and answer anything you guys have. See you later.